All right, there are basically three factors that alter allele frequencies and bring about the most evolutionary change. And they are natural selection, of course, all right, which we've already talked about. Selection, there we go. Genetic drift, which is what mainly I'm going to talk about here in this little lecture. Sorry, I can't spell. Drift. All right, so genetic drift is basically a chance event that causes a change in frequency of alleles in a population. All right, and I'm going to add here in a small population. You're going to see here how that affects a very small population more so than a large population. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples of this. And then another example of change is gene flow. And this is when alleles come into or out of a population. So this could be introduction of somebody new into a population or a new organism, or organisms leave. All right, so that's migration in and out, and that's called gene flow. But I want to spend some time talking about genetic drift. So again, this is a chance event that causes a change in the frequency of a population. All right, so to give you some examples of that. The founder effect. So the founder effect is when a few individuals become isolated from a larger population. And what will most likely happen is that those few individuals that isolate themselves, the allele frequencies in those fewer individuals are probably different than the allele frequencies in the larger population. So let's say I decide to go and form a small population on an island. And the small population that I choose to move with me all happen to have bad eyesight. So the larger human population as a whole, some have bad eyesight, some don't. But in my small population that has decided to isolate ourselves on an island, we all have bad eyesight. So you're going to see that there is very bad eyesight on that island. And you will find that there's a lot, and there's a website here. I'm going to try to go to it. There are incidences where islands have certain traits that are not found in the larger population, and that is because of the founder effect. It just so happened that those that founded that area and now have isolated themselves from the rest of the population happen to have certain diseases. So you will see that there's some examples here of Norway and Iceland having certain diseases. You'll see that some areas of the country or the world have higher incidences of certain diseases because of that. It just so happens that those that happen to found that island or that area had those genes, and then they all mated with one another and passed it on. So you can see that allele frequencies are very different on that smaller population and that island than the larger population because it just so happened that they had those traits. All right, and that's called the founder effect. It's an example of genetic drift because it's a chance event that altered the allele frequencies in a smaller population, all right, because they happened to found that area. Another example of this is called the bottleneck effect. And obviously you can see here some bottles here. And the bottleneck effect is when a random event, and it's usually like a disaster, random event, like a disaster, causes a change in the allele frequencies. All right, so it's the same as founder effect, except it's usually because of some flood or fire or something like that. So you can see here that in this bottle, I have pretty equal amounts of white and blue and very few yellow. So you can see here that there is, let's say, a flood that wipes out all of this population except for a few that survive. So it's called the bottleneck effect because if I pour out a couple of these marbles, you can see here that the only ones that are left after this flood, after this fire, whatever it is, are this group here. So you can see here that this that are left are very different from my original population. No longer any yellows, and now there's more blues than whites. So it's a random event that killed off some, and I get a very quick change in my allele frequencies. I went from being equal blue and white to now more blue than white and no yellow. So that is a random event that happened to affect a very small population. Okay, so again, both examples of genetic drift because random events cause a quick change in allele frequencies. All right, and that is two examples of genetic drift, bottleneck effect and founder effect. All right, humans can obviously cause this to happen a lot. Okay, all right, so that's basically genetic drift.